today take what I would call a defensive posture around talent.
Exactly.
So retain it, reduce turnover, which is funny because the source has turnover as a major metric. But you seem to believe in something a bit different, which is if you invest in people as humans, you're enriching an ecosystem which itself can help your organization and the other organizations as well.
We got to put it in a budget, pay for people to go back to school, and then they're just going to leave us. Like, yep, that's kind of the idea. Well, what's the return on that? I'm like, well, if they stay longer and they're better problem solvers, I guess we have to figure out what the value of that is. But if they leave us, we know what the cost of replacing them is. So let's try to keep them as long as we can and educate them to go do something that is way better for them than just going to another employer that looks like us.
But they will do so in a way that, in the aggregate, in the round, over a period of time, will benefit the community in such a way that it will also benefit you as well. Hello, welcome to Humanity Working. So, a quick confession before we start. On this podcast, we've tended to look at the world of work through a pretty specific lens, I guess, based on my background and my biases. So, our examples come from big companies, from tech environments, or from well-funded startups. And yes, there are some great lessons you can use from those types of companies, but it can also be a bit of a blind spot. About half the workforce in the US doesn't work in places like that. They work in companies where margins are slim for those companies, and margins are often kind of slim for the people who work in them. Not everyone's a knowledge worker, and being stable on a day-to-day basis can matter just as much as career development. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and it's why I've been so interested in the work of our guest today, Mark Peters, who is the CEO of Butterball Farms. He leads an organization that is in that world, and his views on employee centricity come from working on a day-to-day basis with people whose lives might be really tightly shaped by transportation challenges or medical stress or childcare issues and things like that. And as part of that, Mark's been involved for a long time now with an organization he founded called The Source, and we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. There was a book that he wrote some time back called The Source, which I read and would recommend to people. We'll talk about some of those issues today, but we'll also talk in some detail about his new book, which is focused on talent specifically. Welcome to the podcast, Mark, and we'll get into your book and the details of it as we go in, but really happy to have you with us today.
Paul, thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation, especially after our little pre-conversation. So I'm looking forward to where this is going to take us.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start, I guess, with that world in which you live on a day-to-day basis, your day job. Why don't you take us inside Butterball Farms? What does daily life look like for people who work there, and how do the pressures that they face outside of work show up to what happens inside the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, in your introduction was kind of interesting because I do live in that world. I live in a world where there's a lot of people that come to work for me that struggle to make ends meet. And we don't live in the software knowledge worker world. I would say our executive team probably maybe more so, but our culture is such that we're very aware of the lives of the people that come to work for us every day. And so I'll just give you a quick example of how that works in our business. Everybody that provides healthcare for employees knows healthcare costs just keep going up. And so, a lot of, probably not in your world, but in companies like ours, it's not uncommon for a part of that healthcare premium to be passed on to be shared with the employee. And the last 2 years, when we've seen our increases, our insurance brokers say things like, well, on average, this is what companies are asking employees to take on. And, I sit down with the executive team and say, look, I know that if we increase the premium that our employees have to pay by $20 a paycheck, that's a decision that's $20 they're not going to have for something else in their life, which could be, clothes for their kids. It could be, transportation. You mentioned transportation. It could be at the end of the month, the difference between making rent or not making rent. And so we literally have probably 100 people in our workforce that come to work every day that literally $20 over a 2-week period of time makes a difference. That their daily decision-making margins, as you said, are that slim. And so, and I'm really happy that you referenced the source, because that was one of the struggles that, I had, was like, how can we, if we can't raise our pay rates enough to make this unimportant to people, what else can we do? And so we sort of set out on this journey to find community resources to fill some of those gaps. And the source, as an organization, has now become a trusted, knowledgeable relationship for our employees. So when they're having trouble making those ends meet, or they need transportation or childcare, they have questions even about how to use their healthcare program that they do have, the source becomes the organization they go to get those answers, and then enables them to stay at work.
Yeah, can you go into a little bit more detail as to what the source actually is? Because I think it's going to be fascinating for our discussion here. Because I got a real sense, having read both of your books, that the stuff in the source is a strong clue to the thinking in the second book.
I would say that, but this may be a longer conversation, I don't know, but I would say the thinking is very similar. But the source really, so we didn't want to replicate any services. We didn't want to become a financial coach. We didn't want to be a transportation company. We didn't want to be a childcare company. But what we wanted to do was solve that problem for the people that worked for the member companies. So one of my learnings early on was that what I think society doesn't really realize is that when somebody's living in poverty, society puts a value on their time of 0. So if they're not working and they have to go meet with their Department of Health and Human Services caseworker, or they have to go to a local provider to sign up for childcare, or they have to go get whatever services they need to go get, they have to go and stand in line, and it's like, take a number and wait. And a lot of those offices aren't open. If they're working a full-time day job, they so they end up with these really inconvenient choices of having to take time off work to go get this benefit that they need, and then they have to wait, and then maybe they don't get in, and they don't. So then they have to go back another time, right? So the source is, it's really interesting, because they'll get people to the front of the line. So they'll set appointments. So people go in, they've got an appointment time, and then the source will follow up. Did they get what they needed? Did the person show up? So there's an accountability piece that happens both on the provider side and on the individual side. And it makes it basically says to the individual, your time is worth something, and we're gonna make sure that you get these services efficiently when you need them. And that in and of itself has been huge, but it's also helped us figure out which service providers are really good at what they say they do, and
Yeah.
some of them aren't great. Some of them aren't great at it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we've been able to stabilize people in the workforce, which then reduces turnover, of course, and increases engagement. But so they'll do. I mean, the suite of things that they do, and this is why when I talk to other employers about the idea of the source, I tend to try to dissuade them from doing it on their own. And lots of employers have great programs, but they tend to be sort of single issue focus. And the reality is people show up. I mean, we all have complex lives, and we all have our own lives and our own issues. And that it doesn't matter what socioeconomic tranche you live in. Um, it's the same for all of us. And so it's hard to say, hey, if we just focus on housing, that's going to be enough of the market. We're just going to focus on transportation or childcare or, accessing medical care. But they get into, those are the big housing, transportation, childcare, food. We've seen food insecurity come up quite a bit more recently in the source here in West Michigan, as in sort of the top 6 things. But accessing the medical system, even help with prescriptions, reading them, understanding them. What is a doctor? Preparing for a meeting with a doctor, encouraging people to take their kids to parent teacher conferences. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just sounds. But there's a whole group of people in our population who have a little bit of anxiety when it comes to going and talking to one of their kids' teachers at school. So even things like that, the source resource navigators will get involved um, with our employees and with source member companies' employees to help navigate those situations, um, which is huge. And if you help give somebody a language to go talk to their kid's teacher, it's a different way of investing in their life, right? Well, and it's crazy how it's crazy how successful it's been, and it's also really cool. And I probably need to mention this, that it's funded by the member companies. So this is not a highly subsidized organization. I mean, people are paying the true cost of the services, which also is, to me, it to me it demonstrates that there's value in this system, that as employers, if we want to take the initiative, we can unlock the value in the system. I'm not a big policy guy, but I do hope that at some point the source gets big enough to have somebody that can go start speaking into the policy world, because there's some crazy stuff that comes out of the policy world.
For me, one of the things that's interesting about what you're doing at the source is that it it represents, if you like, a lower but very essential layer for people. It's if you like recognizing a layer of stability. You could have centered it around. It's almost like a Maslow view, right? Let's fix these things first,
Yeah.
and make sure that we're reducing the amount of stress associated with the basics of being able to show up for work. Um,
Yeah.
but you also talk about the fact that this hopefully creates stability, and on top of stability can come growth,
Right.
which is really some of the stuff that you explore in your new book, The Retention Trap, right?
Right. Yeah. So before we move on from the source, one of the things I
Sure.
wanted to point out is that the source is funded by its member companies.
Mm.
So, a lot of times you see some of these programs like funded by, again, some sort of a policy grant or nonprofit grants, and The source does get some of those sometimes, but the employers are aware of the full operating cost of the source, and that's sort of how we um, architect the way fees are paid into the source. And we've been able over 22 years to demonstrate a 300% ROI to the employers,
Mm.
which is kind of insane if you think about it. And that comes from agreeing on a cost of turnover. And when we started the source, it was 3,200. I don't know what the number they're using now. And then 3 touch points with any individual was considered a job save. So those were, you have to have some agreements in place to try to attach a value to a non-event, which would be something that takes somebody out of the workforce.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that your listeners understood that this is not some government funded organization, that this is actually paid for, and we demonstrate and can communicate an actual return to the members, the member companies, which is really cool. But so anyway, but yes, you're right. I mean, you can't, and again, so there's a lot of stuff that goes into getting somebody stable. But if somebody is constantly living in crisis, they're physiologically unable to think about the future because they're living under the influence of cortisol, and cortisol by its very nature it limits your options as to what you think you can accomplish. So for me to ask somebody who's living in crisis, like, well, what do you think you want to do in 3 years?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I want to pay my rent on Friday.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what I want to do with. Well, if you could go back to school, what would you go back to school for? Like, I can't. I have no possible way of thinking about that in any productive way. So again, we have this whole population in our society that is kind of stuck. And even if they had opportunity to grow, they don't even know how to go about doing that. So if we can get them to stability, then we can ask them, what do you want to do a year from now? What do you want to do 3 years from now? And this is where I think it starts getting really exciting, especially for small to mid-market companies that have proximity. And again, like your introduction, I have proximity to the people that work for me. I hear the stories about their lives. I hear about kids. I hear about graduations and weddings. And, so I have proximity to my workforce. You get into some of those big scaled companies and the CEOs have no proximity. They don't know.
Yeah.
What's going on with people's lives, and it's statistics, right?
But at the same time, you're the guy that runs the business, and you don't have those same day-to-day pressures of the people that are in the business.
No.
And your dad ran the business before you did, which means, and the business was, in reading your book, feels the business was quite successful back then as well. So it was very interesting for me to learn a little bit more about your own formative experiences, including when you first started at Butterball Farms, that really appeared to help you get that sense of empathy for the employees in a way that you may well not have got otherwise. Could you talk a little bit about that?
100%. I mean, my dad made me go to work at age 12 and basically told people, the supervisors, hey, if my son does anything wrong, just fire him. Don't come talk to me. And my dad didn't bluff. I mean, that sounds funny when I say it, but the reality is he didn't bluff. And so I figured I had to make friends with people because I probably was going to do something wrong and I didn't want to get fired. And what I learned was these are they're wonderful people, and they have families and dreams and aspirations, but they had a very different lived experience than I did. I never worried about clothes. I didn't worry about the cost of my education. I didn't worry if there was going to be food on the table. I didn't, we had a very stable home life, a very regular, uninterrupted schedule. That is not the lived experience of the people I got to know in our workforce. Um, and I grew up in a family environment, you know, a religious family environment, and there's this idea of like taking care of your fellow man, and then having resources that you're supposed to put to work. And then I would see my dad come and run this company, and I didn't see the translation of that philosophy to the people that worked for him. And I'm like, well, this is what you've been given to steward. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that actually mean? And so I think that I've spent most of my life trying to figure out how to be a steward of this resource called an enterprise and the people that come to work for us. And so our mission statement, our business's mission statement is enrich lives. I mean, that's it.
Mm.
That's what we try to do every day. So yeah, it was very eye-opening for me to see the difference in the lived experience between the people that worked for us and what I experienced at home.
So let's say that we get the people in our organizations to a point where we're minimizing the parts that make their work lives unstable,
Right.
and we get to a point where they do have the luxury to start thinking about themselves as talent, and you have
Yes.
the opportunity to start thinking about this this ecosystem of talent that you're building. You point out, I think so interestingly, that many companies today take what I would call a defensive posture around talent.
Exactly.
So protect it,
Mm-hmm.
retain it, reduce turnover, which is funny because the source has turnover as a major metric. But you seem to believe in something a bit different, which is if you invest in people as humans,
Yeah.
you're enriching an ecosystem, which itself can help your organization and the other organizations as well. Let's start with the why, the current state. Why do you think that leaders and organizations get stuck in this sort of defensive mindset when, as you say, when it comes to the other aspects of their business, many of them are like, oh, let's solve this problem, let's solve this problem, let's solve this problem. And this defensive mindset, which is centered around well, let's not lose anybody, and all that kind of stuff.
So Paul, I have a theory about this, and I'll tell you my theory. I don't have any data that says this is true, so I'm going to just disclaim my theory right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my working theory. My working theory is that we set out to, when we start a business, to solve some kind of a problem. We build a product, we build a piece of software, we have a better service than the guy down the street, whatever it is. And if we're good at it, people pay us for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get enough people to pay us for it, we need more people to help us deliver it.
Yeah.
And so we don't really get into business thinking about how can I be great at hiring people and getting them to help me do this. So we get whoever we get to get started. And as our organizations grow, we start to realize that, oh my word, having humans come into my workplaces is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And so then we hire HR professionals or attorneys, and they're all very risk averse. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, we need these rules and regulations, and we need these policies, and we need to, and so without really thinking about it, we start developing what I would call sort of a fear-based or scarcity mindset around people and talent in our organizations. And I mean, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and you've had some, great guests who I think demonstrate that that's not true for all organizations and organizations that from the beginning do a great job at people. But you look at the statistics of how many people really hate going to work, and you realize that there's a lot of us that don't do this well.
Yeah.
And so I think that my working theory is because most people don't get into business to do talent well.
Yeah.
And so, we so and so's not coming to work anymore, or now we need to have. It's just the stuff that comes up ends up being more subtractive when it comes to delivering. Taking your time and delivering your product, doing what you got into business to do, and somewhat irritating.
Yeah.
And you don't tend to look at it as an opportunity or a problem to solve. And I think that's my hope. And when I wrote the book, The Retention Trap, I actually threw the first manuscript out entirely because I was going down sort of this fear-based scarcity mindset tracks. Like, we need to do this different. And it hit me one day that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for small to mid-market companies in a very fast-changing talent market to set themselves apart and to build a new way to attract talent. And we're going to need it. We're going to need it to compete with some of those big companies for the best and brightest people to help us deliver our value strategy. Because, and I highlight some of this in the Retention Trap, there's some big system work going on in our country to help large-scale companies define that talent pipeline all the way into the middle schools. And
Yep.
Small to mid-market companies are not thinking about this. So, yeah, I get as far in the book as to talk about or to contemplate talent flow, which to me is intentionally partnering with other employers to build a talent ecosystem beyond single companies. And I know, because I've been talking about this for a while, that's a difficult conversation to have with other employers.
Well, I suspect that what's happening here is that organizations are sort of caught between two possible approaches. And what I love about when you're talking about talent flow here is you're highlighting an alternative approach. But I think where employers potentially get stuck, I agree with your assessment, by the way, as to the fact that it's not core to what they do. And I think the clue is in the name, human resources, right? I mean, human, even though companies are changing their names to chief people officers, HR is still the function, and human resource suggests you got a bunch of resources, and humans just happen to be one of them.
Right.
Now, I think that where organizations get stuck is they form their businesses in the way that you said they form their businesses. Then they sort of have this realization that somewhere that whole statement of people are our most important asset, somewhere that's sort of true.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the business school stuff tells you that anything that is core to your success is the stuff you focus on, and anything that isn't core to your success is the stuff you kind of outsource.
Yeah.
So because of that, they tend to think of like all of the human stuff as being their secret sauce. How do I hire? How do I retain? How do I promote? And so on and so forth. But then they don't do it very well. Right. And so, and after they're not doing it very well, then they start to do the natural thing, and something you do point out in the book, which is the sort of finger pointing thing. Oh, we're not getting the best people because of the schools, or we're not getting the best people because of society or video games or the family or whatever it would happen to be. We hear this, by the way, all the time ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So versus which is why I love you're so into systems thinking and all this kind of stuff, versus pointing out that even if any of that or all of that is true, that system that you've just been blaming, you're part of that system. So therefore,
Exactly.
therefore, there are things that you can do in being part of the system. And I think you point to something very interesting, which is the idea of, just as you do with the source, you you can you can build an ecosystem where the talent itself is improving
Yes.
holistically, and you get to reap the benefits of that. If you
Yes.
believe that, for example, the colleges aren't producing the people of of the necessary quality, or the high schools are not, or anywhere else is not, you can sit on the sidelines and blame them for 6 years, or you can or you can actually start taking efforts to make sure that at least inside your organization that people are learning and growing and so on, and as they flow into the ecosystem, that might benefit other people, but hopefully if you can persuade other companies to do the same thing, then that will benefit you as well.
Yeah.
um, I I'm really interested, I guess, in the fact that you talk about blue ocean strategy. That's a very blue ocean strategy approach, as in let's just grow the pool more broadly.
Right.
But it's very interesting that even in organizations that think in terms of blue ocean strategy when it comes to their commercial strategy, often do not when it comes to their own
It's
the humans who work inside their organizations. So you said you've spoken to people about this, and
yeah.
you've talked about talent flow and so on. What are the pushbacks that you're getting, and why do you think those pushbacks exist?
So it's kind of interesting to me, and there's a whole lot of things that that you just said that I want to respond to.
I know that was a horrible question, Mark. It was it's like interviewing 101. I broke about 17 versions of it because I think I had 6 questions in there and 3 points of view, and so apologies. So just take whatever you want from it.
No, I love it. I think that there's just this mindset, and I honestly, Paul, I've run into it inside my own organization, and I'm going to go back because I want to tell you a story, but like, what's it going to cost us to do this?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think it's going to cost us that much. Well, we got to put it in a budget, and like, we're going to like pay for people to go back to school, and then they're just going to leave us. Like, yep, that's kind of the idea. Well, what's the return on that? I'm like, well, if they stay longer and they're better problem solvers, I guess we have to figure out what the value of that is. But
Mm-hmm.
if they leave us, we know what the cost of replacing them is. So let's try to keep them as long as we can, and educate them to go do something that is way better for them than just going to another employer that looks like us, because that doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
And so if I can get people, and my working theory right now is people that are coming in the front door of our business, our turnover is probably between 9 months and 12, but if I could get them to 18 to 2 years, and then they go on to a much better job, there's a value to me in keeping them in our workforce that much longer. What is that value? That's what we're trying to figure out. And so this is what leads me to the story. When I launched my book, The Retention Trap, in June, I made a statement at the launch party that I was hoping to get 5 to 7 companies to come together and work with me to make the benefits cliff irrelevant.
Mm.
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the benefits cliff, but for
Why don't you
people,
explain it?
yeah, I mean, high level, and it's between, say, somebody making $18 an hour to between $28 and $30 an hour, depending on what subsidies they're getting. Every dollar they earn, they lose more in subsidies than they get in what they're taking home. So if you partner that with what we talked about before with people living complex, destabilized lives, the chances of people getting out of poverty, like literally becoming not working poor anymore, are very close to zero. I mean,
Hmm.
there's people that you can say, oh, I know somebody that did it, but the system is not set up for people to successfully transfer or legitimately move out of poverty, because that's a tough skill set to move. The skill set at $18 an hour to the skill sets at $30+ an hour are very different in our
Yeah.
working world. And you start getting into the $30+ an hour jobs, and you're into more technical level kinds of jobs, more education. So actually right now we will be actioning our first pilot. And I didn't have a pilot when I launched the book, and I wished I had, but we are going to move 15 people from our company into facilities jobs at one of the local healthcare systems within 18 months. And we're going to sign them up, and we're going to pay for all the education and all the training. And we're the healthcare system is going to be involved in the whole process, so that when they get done, they will move into they will have $30 an hour plus jobs waiting for them. And we're going to try to launch small pilots every 2 months. Since we started with the first 7 companies, we've now had two new companies just in the last week sort of join this effort. So I'm super excited about, actually, like, if you invite me back a year from now, I'm going to have some
Hmm.
data around what this looks like and what participation looks like, and starting to define what kind of value gets created in our system if we can do this. And part of, like, the education piece is, we're not victims to the education system. We can go to the education system and say, this is what we need, and these are the
Yep.
sound bites we need it in. And oh, by the way, there's the software delivery platforms. We've got a platform company that's allowing us to use their platform for free, because they're so intrigued by this test model that they're letting us use the delivery platform. And so now we're in the process of trying to find a couple of education institutions that are willing to deliver content in the bite sizes that we need. But we're driving, the employers are driving, and we're saying, this is what we need. And we've got this vision to get people legitimately out of the working poor. And this is the first time I've said this on a more public platform, because we just hit some milestones in the last couple of weeks. So you're the first to sort of hear about it.
Well, Mark, I'm super glad we're breaking news on that. What I think is what I think is really really intriguing by this, and I think this is going to be the hardest thing, but the most important thing. What you're saying here is a bit of a variant to there was the Henry Ford quote. The one I like is the Richard Branson one, the more recent one. The train people well enough so that they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't want to.
Exactly.
But it is an interesting variant on this because you're even sort of almost going beyond that, and understanding and embracing the fact that there will be a shift from people that are in roles inside your organization,
Yeah.
whereby inevitably what you're training them for may cause them to leave your organization, but they
Right.
will do so in a way that, in the aggregate, in the round, over a period of time, um, will benefit the community in such a way that it will also benefit you as well. That's some long term thinking in a
Yeah.
world where it's really really difficult to do long term thinking. So how do you um, how do you go about telling that story in a way that can appeal to the other small to medium businesses that need to stay relevant in this new world
Yeah.
of work in the same way that you do?
Yeah. So again, I think a couple of points I want to make to that is, I think for the small and mid market companies, which tend to be more closely held, and have proximity to the people that work for them. This is our opportunity to stay relevant. This is our opportunity to attract people. My writer also had asked me, like, you need an analogy for this book.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't come up with it until I visited Salt Lake City and I went and saw the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
It's a terminal lake, right? I think there's 4 or 5 rivers that flow
Mm-hmm.
into it, none that flow out, and only 2 organisms that live there. And I'm fortunate enough to live in the Great Lakes region, which is one of the most biodiverse places on earth, and water flows in everywhere and water flows out everywhere. And we've got all kinds of, interesting plant life and fish life and all the rest of it. It's like, well, do you want your business to be like the Great Lakes or the Great Salt Lake?
Mm.
So I do think that's an interesting way to think about the flow of talent. But since we've announced the launch of this project, and it's called iNexus, is the name of what we've named it. And I've heard you talk about this with some of your other guests about creating more purpose at work.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is, like, the people in our organization who are running scheduling on the platform, on the plant floor, or who are, the guy that runs our entire operations group. They are so excited about being a part of this and making this successful, and seeing, because now part of the reason that they're coming to work is to create a different kind of opportunity for people that come to work for them.
Yeah.
And the energy that we've created, and we don't even have the 15 people identified yet. The application process is going to be happening in December, but we've unanticipatedly unlocked, like, I get to go to work and I do this job and I run this plant, but I also get to help people get that next success step. And it's really gratifying for me to see them be so excited about helping coworkers get to a better place.
Yeah.
It's
I
really
think you're
cool.
on. I really genuinely do think you're onto something profound here, Mark. We recently had a guest on the podcast, which you will not have heard yet because it's not been released. I'm looking for the book here. Here we go. Nature's Blueprint for Business.
All right.
Harnessing the hidden power of edges. That'll for those that are listening, it should be in your feed just before this episode with Mark goes out. But that in that book, she talks a great deal about this idea of diversity and where diverse ecosystems thrive, and the idea of being able to create. She talks about flow an enormous amount, and the idea of flourishing environments coming out of flow. And so,
What was the name of that again?
Nature's Blueprint for Business: Harnessing the Hidden Power of Edges by Ines Garcia. So this is very, very, I think, forward thinking, in a way that is going to be really, really important as we move into the future of work. Because as we kind of finish up here, I want to talk about I don't know if it's an elephant in the room or not, but it's a really, really interesting scenario that is being painted by future of work experts and future of work economists and so on, whereby you potentially see a lot of job growth happening in and around tech hubs.
Sure.
And then you see potentially some stagnation inside the parts of the country that are not those tech hubs, where more, in quotes, I don't know, for want of a better term, where more traditional work happens, if you like. Right. I think what you point out here is that if you go to work for my old company, Microsoft, or you go to work for Apple, you work for that type of organization for a particular reason, and it's not the same reason that you work for a company like Butterball Farms.
Right.
So the question then becomes, what is the reason to go work for these types of organizations? And through, I think, the source and through this new work that you're doing now, you're hinting at what that can be.
Yeah.
You're hinting at the idea that the companies that are in that environment, if they can find better ways to enrich the communities in which they live,
Yeah.
if they as the entities, as the leaders inside those organizations and the organizations themselves can themselves improve the community
Right.
beyond the ways in which they've traditionally looked to do it by, I don't know, sponsoring a sports team or something
Right.
along those lines, but actually realistically and make that place to be a better place to live, then
Yeah.
what you have is a bunch of people that want to live in that environment and want to work for those organizations because it allows them to have a complete work-life experience that includes the company and includes an enriched community. And I
Yeah.
think that's really the heart of what you're pointing to. My last question is related to that.
Okay.
You've discussed in the book about how sometimes leaders will get to a certain point in their evolution whereby they've done the I'm going to make money through my company thing, and now I'm going to go do good in the broader world.
Yes.
And you point out,
Yeah.
hang on, you've got this thing that you've made
Oh,
successful
my word.
that you can use as an engine to do exactly that. So my question for you is, as you look towards the next chapter of your career,
Yeah.
what do you want to do in order to be able to continue this work beyond writing an interesting book and starting starting a very interesting experiment that I hope you will come back on the podcast in a year and talk about?
So honestly, I years ago I heard somebody speak who was talking, and he had retired from the aerospace industry, and it was a great company that he'd built and that he sold. But he was kind of on a speaking circuit, and he told his story was all about these great things that they used to do in that company. And the farther away he got from that event, the less relevant he became because he wasn't a practitioner anymore.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, I want to take our mission statement, which is enrich lives, and I want to use the platform of my enterprise to go out and really encourage other people that run enterprises to think differently about this interaction with talent. And a word that I've been using is resilient. Like if we really focus on helping the people that work for us be more resilient in a complex world. And so you can define complexities as destabilizing stuff at the bottom. You can talk about people that are now living in fear of AI destroying their jobs that may be somewhere in the middle. But as an enterprise, to stay relevant, we're going to have to deal with all of these issues. And we want to build resiliency. And I think if we start by understanding what our people need to be resilient in a complex world, it's going to help us as an enterprise unit be more resilient in a complex world. And then the higher order is if we get good at doing that, then we're all going to be more resilient as a community in this fast changing world. And so, but I think it's got to start with our people, and you've got to understand what the drivers are. And so the source, we're trying to understand the complexities and how to solve it. But when you start talking about people's success, like, Paul, what is it you want to do to be successful next? And how can I help you get there? Mark, so for me, it's like, I want to go out and talk to more business leaders, and I want to wrestle with them around the costs and the benefits of this stuff. And I want them to see that being curious about the people that work for them and understanding that they have agency in solving some of these problems that they want to blame on the externalities. And I would go as far as to say, given the demographic work that I've done for small and mid-market company leaders, if they don't get smart at this, they don't get good at it, they're going to have a really hard time being relevant in the future economy. I just think they're not going to be able to compete for talent.
I completely agree. That's a chastening moment to end it on, but I think also a call to action, Mark.
Yeah.
So, really, really appreciate your time today. We have included in the show notes all the details of Mark's two excellent books, plus we'll include some information on how to get in touch with Mark if you're interested in moving forward with him. I know you and I, Mark, are going to have some additional conversations about this as well. I think you're doing
That would be
amazing
great.
work, and I hope we can help you meet your goals.
Thank you very much. This was fun. I appreciate
Thanks a
the
lot.
invitation to be here.
Thank you.